So, talking about things that are not worth 29 PayPals put together, what's also not worth 29 PayPals? New York Community Bank, which is a regional bank. And interesting fact that this was the bank that bought Signature Bank, which was one of the banks that failed back in March of 2023 during the banking crisis. So it looks like they ate some tainted meat, Walking Dead style, because now they're the ones that are in trouble. So, yeah, maybe the contagion has spread. Maybe the virus has spread to New York Community Bank, because the stock is down around 60% since just a few weeks ago. And yeah, usually banks, like, I don't want to jinx it. So, like, don't get mad at me if you're a shareholder of New York Community Bank. But I just, just looking at general trends, usually banks do not survive 60% plunges. They could struggle for a bit, and today was down 6.5% again. They could drag on, and sometimes it goes up, right? So it hasn't been down every single day since that initial big drop. And the initial big drop was, I think they reported earnings, and they reported a surprise, some type of metric that was on the downside, a surprise. So an unpleasant surprise. And it triggered kind of a panic. But yeah, usually with banks, banks rely on confidence, right? And in our financial system, banks are all a fractional reserve, meaning that they don't hold 100% of the deposits that customers uh, put at the bank, which means that if all the customers go to the bank and want to withdraw at once, the bank will fail. That's just by definition how fractional reserve works. And when your bank stock drops 60% in less than a month, then that might be enough motivation for people to panic and then go to the bank to withdraw. And I think for New York Community Bank, around a third of the funds are uninsured. So, for those of you who don't know, in the United States, there is federal insurance, as is the case in Canada too, for banks. So, to prevent bank runs. But the issue with the federal insurance is that it only covers up to a certain amount. So, I believe in the United States is $250,000, so 250K. So if you have more than that, and the bank goes bankrupt, you're only covered up to 250K, and whatever you have above that, if the government doesn't bail you out, then you're just, SOL, right? You guys know what SOL means, so I don't have to say it out loud. But yeah, so yeah, up to a third of the deposits at New York Community Bank are uninsured. So, you know, maybe if I was a customer at this bank, I would be a little bit concerned as of right now, and I would be calling somebody to get my money. So, what do you guys think, though? Is this the start of another financial crisis like we've seen in March of 2023, which would the Fed kind of bailed that one out, so it didn't kind of fully blow up? But do you think this is a repeat of March 2023? Oh yeah, and actually one last thing before I pass it back to you guys, the program that the Fed started called BTFP, I think. I forget what it stands for. It's like Bank Term Funding Program. So that's the program that the Fed introduced to help banks that are struggling. So the way that it works is that if you have a bunch of assets that have gone down in price because the Fed jacked up interest rates, if you have a bunch of assets like bonds and stuff that have gone down in price, because interest rates and bond prices kind of work opposite. So if you jack up interest rates, the bond prices fall. So if your bonds are all of a sudden no longer worth that much because the Fed uh, pumped up interest rates, then the Fed started this program called BTFP, where you can take your bonds to the Fed and be like, hey, please value these at the price that I paid for them, not at the current market price. And the Fed goes, yeah, sure. And then you can use that at the original price as collateral for the Fed to lend you money so that you can stay afloat. So this program is kind of what arguably prevented the financial crisis that started in March of 2023 with the regional banking collapse of SVB, Signature Bank, Silvergate, a bunch of other ones, First Republic. Um, but yeah, this program is expiring in March of this year because it's supposed to be a 1 year program. And the Fed has said that they will not renew it. So if they don't renew it and this program expires and we have regional banks failing again, then what happens? Right. So what do you guys think? Let me toss it to you guys now. Is this the start of a new banking crisis? Are we in trouble? Are we in danger?
I think it's a start of New York Community Bank's banking crisis because I think they're gonna. That's my 2 cents on their current condition. I don't have a lot of confidence in them sticking around in the long run, just based on this current drop and the fact that with fractional bank reserves, if I want to get my money and if I'm looking at this market going, this place looks like it might fail, or I have all these alternatives that aren't going to fail or aren't looking like they're going to fail, and it costs me basically no money to move it all to them, I'll just move them to them. And then when everyone uses that logic, fractional bank reserves ensures that it basically, once the ship starts sinking, it fills up very quickly. It sinks very quickly. And I suspect that they are in that scenario. And whether or not this will cause a more widespread banking crisis, it's a considerably smaller bank than Silicon Valley Bank was. So I'm thinking that probably there is a lot of the contagion will be kept pretty minimal as long as no other banks get pulled in early. So I don't think it'll be nearly as bad. And I wouldn't be that surprised if the Fed bails them out again because what is the Fed but the corporate banks bailout, the bailout of last reserves. The taxpayers pay for all the banks gambling.
Yeah, you know what's funny? Like the BTFP program, like Bank Term Funding Program, it's funny that they chose that acronym because it's one letter away from BTFD, which stands for buy the effing dip. So, uh, yeah, I mean, essentially that's what it is, right? Because like it injects liquidity into the market in a time where the Fed is trying to take liquidity out of the market because they're trying to kind of crack down on inflation. So it's the Fed is playing a very kind of delicate balancing game where they have to, not let the economy completely destroy itself, but they also want to kind of take liquidity out of the economy and cool it down so that inflation can come down. So I'm not jealous of Jerome Powell's job at all. I think he has one of the most difficult jobs in the world because he's literally like walking a tightrope and balancing. But yeah, Dom, thoughts?
Before we continue, could you just repeat the question one more time? My computer keeps lagging, so.
Yeah, no worries. So I was saying how do you think that this is the start of another banking crisis, right? So what do you think about the New York Community Bank situation in general? And do you think that this is some like credit event that's going to trigger, more economic crises or calamities to come? Or do you think that this is just like an isolated incident and we shouldn't really worry about it?
Okay, I guess you can just put it this way. I guess what Tristan was saying earlier is that this bank isn't nearly as big as a Valley Bank, but it still can create some sort of domino effect. So, for example, if New York Community Bank was like a small domino hitting onto another domino, I guess it's not going to move the second domino, but it's certainly going to affect it possibly moving. So, if maybe the interest rates continue to pause, or if not, continue to rise, which I don't think will happen, things might get worse for everyone, even with that program that you were talking about earlier. But maybe it is time for a rate cut or a pause. And then the way I'm thinking right now, and what Andy said before, I'm also not jealous of Jay Powell's job. It's really hard to decide like what's the right thing to do for everyone, or for this bank, or for the future. And like, yeah, it's tough. So it's really hard to answer this question, but it could get worse. So maybe it's time to make some changes.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I've said all I needed to say. I'm personally not super concerned just yet. As Tristan said, it is a small bank, and I think I was reading an article where some Fed official was saying that there's too many regional banks in America, anyways. So it's like kind of just doing the regional banks a dirty and just like kind of throwing them under the bus, because essentially what the Fed is saying, and I don't know if that official represents the entire Fed, but you know, it is the opinion of some members of the Fed that there's too many regional banks in America anyways, and it's okay that some of them dies. Like, he didn't say that last part, but you know, it's kind of implied. So yeah, I ultimately think that perhaps the Fed won't care about New York Community Bank, and they'll just you know, let them go bankrupt if that is where the stock is going. Again, I'm not saying that for sure it will go bankrupt, but it's definitely not looking good if you just look at like a 1 month chart, right? Like, it just fell off a cliff, like the stock price. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, Dom, what do you
One more thing to add.
Yeah.
We're Canadian, eh? But if I was American, you guys are crazy. You have two banks to choose from: Citibank or Chase, and nothing else. Like, does this not tell you, like, gosh, like, I don't know. Our five banks are pretty well protected, or like the big five. So like, I'm not really concerned having my money in it. But for you guys, oh my God, just Chase and call it a day.
isn't it the big six in Canada? National Bank, yo.
Oh well, National Bank. That's another story. But anyway,
Yeah, so for our audience members who don't know, we have a bank here in Canada called the National Bank of Canada. They're not the National Bank of Canada. They're literally just called National Bank. And they're actually the smallest out of the big six, if you could even consider National Bank one of the big six. So when you hear National Bank, it's not the Central Bank of Canada. It's just some, you know, regional bank, I guess you can say. Although it's not really regional, it's across Canada, but you know, whatever.